address tonight, we've laid the premise of that couples fall in and out of love based off of needs met or unmet. We gave the analogy of a love bank to catch some of you guys back up, because I know it's been a week. The idea of a love bank, and that love bank, you're making either positive deposits or you're making withdrawals, just like you would in any bank account, okay? But tonight, I want to hone in on the issue of withdrawals, okay? We've already covered the issues of deposits, and so if you haven't already watched those, they're on YouTube. You can go and watch the first and second series, if you will, and you get caught back up. But conflict, okay? There are two kinds of conflict. The first sense of conflict is when you're attempting to try to get something from your partner, okay? That's conflict number one. Conflict number two is, in fact, when you're trying to get your partner to stop doing something, okay? Is anybody with me? So that's what conflict is identified. It's either you're trying to get your spouse to do something or you're trying to get them to stop doing something, okay? Pending that you're consistent in holding to the power of enthusiastic agreement, for those of you that were here in class prior weeks, in your binder, the power of enthusiastic agreement, we stress the importance of that pretty heavily, okay? And you have openness and honesty in your marriage, and you share everything with your spouse, okay? So pending those two things, then you will have conflict. Did you hear me? Pending that you are in agreement about enthusiastic agreement and the policy of enthusiastic agreement, that every decision that you ever make will be with one and the other making an enthusiastic agreement about whatever topic it may be, about everything. There is nothing that is decided within your home divorced from enthusiastic agreement. Does that make sense? Pending that, along with openness and honesty, okay? Openness and honesty, as long as those two core ingredients are existent within the marriage, there will be conflict. By design, we advocate for conflict. You should have conflict in your marriage. It's healthy. It's godly even. Conflict arises when you have both individuals advocating and negotiating for their emotional needs. It's either attempting to negotiate for your partner to do something for you or to stop doing something. Does that make sense? Lots of conflict. Conflicts constantly every day. Every day you should have conflict. If you're not, there is a problem. You are not being consistent with enthusiastic agreement, and likely openness and honesty is not the foundation of your marriage. Now, we all know that couple that says, my wife and I, we never fight, right? Who all here knows that couple? Oh, we never fight. And I always want to ask them, okay, how long has she been wearing the pants? Right? Truly. But when they say that, what they're actually saying is that in my marriage, we don't have conflict. That's a problem. It always ends up with one person sacrificing their individual needs for the sake of their partner. You didn't hear me. If you don't have conflict, what you have in turn is a partner who is consistently sacrificing for the sake of their partner. And this is unhealthy. You do not want this. This is not considered godly. This isn't considered a good attribute to have within your marriage. Because what ends up happening is you're sacrificing at the expense of making a withdrawal from your love bank to then give to your partner's love bank. That's not good. You with me? Arguing and fighting, however, you should never do. There is a difference. There is a difference between arguing and fighting and conflict. two kinds of conflict. Remember, one is advocating and negotiating for your individual needs and wanting your partner to do something. Conflict number two is wanting and negotiating for your individual needs and wanting them to stop doing something. This is healthy. This is what is present within a marriage that stays above the love barrier to where it is that you're in positive territory within your bank account. Are you with me? Okay. Remember, romance is a science. And just like science, if you apply the same laws, the same ingredients, and the same processes, you will produce the same results every time. Marriage is no different. We've been arguing for the fact that how we curve the divorce rates. Think about how many people you know are on to their first, their second, their third, their fourth, their fifth marriage. God help us, right? Or worse, people don't get married anymore. Why? Because they don't understand the core ingredients of how one falls into love to begin with. It's just like science. You apply the same laws to your marriage, you will fall back in love with your partner, and you will be able to live in positive territory. How do we curb the divorce rate in our culture? It's not communication, right? We established that. It's not commitment. Lots of people say how committed they are, and yet they still get divorced. How many people say it's about communication? How many marital books have been written upon communication, and yet look at the divorce rate? Or happy wife, happy life, man. Oh, okay. Yeah, that actually works. Obviously, divorce is still prominent within our culture. And so studies have found that the way that you curb the divorce rate is you get both partners to stay in love with one another. And that's what we're talking about tonight. These next 2 weeks, we're going to be looking at the issue of withdrawals, as we already mentioned. Now, for the sake of time, we didn't touch upon all of the deposits. I want to just make this point now. We did not touch upon all of the deposits, okay? Those deposits being such things as sexual fulfillment, admiration, recreational activities, affection, intimate conversation, openness and honesty, attractiveness, domestic support. God only knows it's hell on earth if I don't have clean underwear. Financial support, and family commitment. There's something about every woman built in her DNA. She wants to see her husband be a part of the family, right? We can't just sit on the couch and let the wife raise the kids, gentlemen. So family commitment. We only touched upon the two primary needs in past series about those two biggest needs of your partner, and we attacked that viciously. So I didn't have time to talk about issues like financial support, domestic support, family commitment, attractiveness, openness and honesty. These are all deposits that you could still be making, but remember, the primary deposits are going to help keep you in that positive territory. Does that make sense? Okay. If you become a master at making deposits within your partner's bank account, don't you think that it's in your best interest to go ahead and start plugging the holes and limit the amount of withdrawals? If you've got a bucket and you keep filling the bucket up, but you got a bunch of holes in it, you're not going to get very far. Okay? For now, I want to revisit a concept that I touched upon, I flirted with a little bit in the last couple weeks. We didn't go after it heavily, but tonight we are. I almost said it in passing, actually. Some of you will remember, but I mentioned the concept of what is called freeloaders, renters, and buyers. A freeloader is somebody who's unwilling to put much effort into the marriage. They don't put much effort into the romantic relationship of their marriage. he or she does only what comes naturally and expects only what comes naturally from their partner. Are you with me? It's like a person who tries to live in a house without paying rent or paying the mortgage and doing anything to improve it unless the person is in the mood to do so. This is a freeloader. Oh man, I'll just go with it willy-nilly. This is what we have in the church today. Seriously, I'm going to go in a preaching mode in a minute. I haven't preached in a while, so I'm getting antsy. All right? But this is what we have in our culture. A bunch of feel-gooders, a bunch of wet noodles, a bunch of people that are more about the Peter tingle and the goosebump than they are about actually giving themselves over to the things of God. In similar fashion, the freeloader is the exact same type of person. They take their marriage and they go, woo, whichever way the wind blows. They're willy-nilly about the issue. They're a freeloader. They're there in passing. Freeloaders don't stay married very long. A renter is willing to provide limited care, hence limited care, as long as it's in his or her best interest. The romantic relationship, this is a renter here, is considered tentative. So the care is viewed as more or less short-term. It's like a person who rents a house and is willing to stay as long as the conditions seem fair. Right? Until he or she finds something better. The person is willing to pay a reasonable amount of rent and keep the house clean, but's not willing to really well do anything with it. They're not going to do any major repairs. They might unclog a toilet occasionally, but that's the most that you're going to get out of it. Okay? Any major repair, they're going to leave up to the landlord, or in our case, the banker. A buyer, watch this here, watch the difference here, is willing to demonstrate extraordinary sense of care by making permanent changes in his or her behavior and lifestyle to make the romantic relationship mutually fulfilling. Solutions to problems are long-term solutions and must work well, watch this here, for both parties. This is key. Because the romantic relationship is viewed as exclusive and permanent. It's like a person who buys a house for life with a willingness to make repairs that accommodate changing, watch this, changing needs. Remember how we argued the whole premise that people fall in and out of love based off of needs met or unmet. This buyer mentality is somebody who's willing to adjust and change, and dare I say, repent, and change their course to then in fact meet the needs of their partner regardless of their uncomfortability. They're willing to paint walls. They're willing to install new carpet. They're willing to replace the roof if needed. They're willing to do remodeling. At the end of the day, they're willing to do what is necessary to ensure the emotional needs of their partner are met. They fall on the sword, if you will. Now, I'm going to read a freeloader story. This is this is a real story. Her name is Brenda. And Brenda, I want you to try to guess, who is this? Is it a freeloader? Is it a renter? Or is this a buyer? Watch what she writes. Before we go any further, I want you to understand that I'm really past complexities now. I don't want to work at making love work. It must never be hard, or it's just not worth it. I do what I do because I like to do it, and never expect anything in return. I will never again be the crutch for someone else. I won't be drained by someone else's needs. Someone who is too crippled in his emotions to be able to give me what it is. I am not sure what it is that you want from me, but I'm happier now in my life than I've ever been. I have finally given myself permission to enjoy life and to love myself. I have no desire to take myself on a backward spiral anymore. Love, Brenda. So what do you all think? Is she a freeloader Is she a renter or is she a buyer? She's a freeloader, hardcore. Okay. You know how we have a creed as a congregation, right? Well, the freeloaders' creed is as follows. Premise 1. Romantic relationships should never be work. Premise 2. Or I shouldn't say premises, point 2. Love me as I am or not at all. Love me as I am or not at all. Point number 3. Bargaining is for businessmen, never for lovers. This is a freeloader. They don't stay married very long. For those that were here last week, you'll remember a freeloader's creed, if you will, those 3 points that I just read off, flies in the face of which policy? The policy of enthusiastic agreement. Freeloader don't care about the enthusiastic agreement of their partner, do they? Instead of them only doing things that make them happy, like the freeloader, let me back up. The policy of enthusiastic agreement is such an important policy that if you don't get a hold of, your love bank balance is going to suffer. Let me just make that point very known. The renter's philosophy, however, is quite different. Instead of them only doing things that make them happy, like the freeloader, the renter will oftentimes do anything to make their partner happy. In other words, they sacrifice. Matter of fact, they believe that they should match the care that they receive in a romantic relationship with the care that they, in fact, have received in return. They regularly elevate how fair their relationship is, making sure that the levels of effort and sacrifice are even. Are you with me? If renters believe they are giving more than what they are getting, they feel justified in demanding more for themselves to balance the scales. Okay? What's all too common for renters is that renters will sacrifice, or in other words, make withdrawals or allow withdrawals from their love bank balance at the expense of making deposits within their partners. This is unhealthy and unwise. As time goes on, they end up feeling that the scales are not fair because they're making sacrifices at the expense of meeting their partner's needs. And in turn, what you will have, and this happens all the time, if anybody's exposed to marriage counseling, I see it constantly in how one partner will be more in love than the other person. It happens constantly. Why does that happen? Because one partner is willing to sacrifice at the expense for their partner. Eventually, the scales will enter into negative account balances. And what do you experience in negative account balances? Overdraft fees. Now the bank's coming after you, aren't they? You got negative overdraft fee after negative overdraft fee, and it's very difficult to get that partner who made all the sacrifices to begin with to return back to a healthy account balance. I'm going to read the renter story. I just gave it away, I shouldn't have. But this is the renter story, okay? Cheryl and Brad are married with 2 small children. They both have full-time careers. And when they come home from work, they're both exhausted. It's all they can do to feed their children and get them ready for bed. Their busy schedules have left little time for them to have a romantic relationship. And Cheryl is more aware of the problem than Brad is. Honey, Cheryl says one evening, I don't think our relationship is as good as it should be. You don't seem to care about me the way you used to. Brad looks away from the TV and says, I'm sorry. What would you like me to do about it? I've just been very unhappy lately, Cheryl explains, almost in tears. You used to call me at work several times a day. You'd tell me when you were coming home. You'd ask me how my day went. You'd help me with the kids and the dishes. And after the kids went to bed, you'd watch TV with me. Now you ignore me most of the time. I don't know what's happening to us." Cheryl had been giving this problem quite a bit of thought. She was unhappy and had a good idea of what was missing. "I'm really sorry I've been neglecting you lately," Brad says. "But you know how crazy it's been lately at work." Brad was not happy with her reaction. After it was that she says, "Well, what's more important to you, your work or me?" Cheryl was angry at Brad, and Brad wasn't happy about her reaction, but he resisted the temptation to tell her that he was too tired to get into an argument. Instead, he offered a suggestion. "Why don't we go to San Francisco next weekend and get reacquainted? I'll make the travel plans if you ask your parents to take care of the kids." "That's just like a man, isn't it?" Cheryl sputtered. "I want a little bit more attention from my husband during the week, and all you offer is a weekend of sex. Do you always have to think about what you want? Besides, I've already made plans to go shopping with Kate next week. All I want is a little of your precious attention. Do you think you can handle that?" As a buyer, Brad wants to find a solution that works well for both of them. He views Cheryl as his exclusive and permanent romantic partner and is taking her problem seriously. But his suggestions will always include his own interest as well as hers. That's why a weekend in San Francisco seemed to him something they both would in fact enjoy. But Cheryl, a renter, isn't interested in solutions that would make Brad happy. In fact, she wants him to sacrifice for her to prove that he truly cares. So after her initial outburst, she offers a suggestion that requires sacrifice that will help make up for all the neglect that she's been experiencing lately. "Brad, I'm sorry I got upset with you," she says as she puts her arm around him. "Why don't I call Kate and cancel our shopping trip so you can go shopping with me instead? That would make me feel much better." Now, shopping is obviously one of Brad's least favorite things to do, right? I don't know a man who likes to shop. So now he's in a quandary. Does he sacrifice his own happiness to make Cheryl feel better? Or does he continue to negotiate with her to find a mutually enjoyable solution? Let's think of some other possibilities, is all Brad can think to say. And it's enough to call Cheryl to blow her cork. Freaks out on him. She screams, "Fine! Now I know why you ignore me so much of the time. You don't care about me anymore. I'm going to bed." Now, if Brad would have been a renter also, he could have entered into a screaming match with her and called her spoiled, rotten, immature, all in which would be fairly true. However, he also could have sacrificed his needs at the expense of meeting Cheryl's needs, and in turn allowing for withdrawals within his love bank to then make deposits within her love bank. Now it's here I want to, in fact, introduce another concept, and for those that haven't been up until this point, this is brand new for you. It is the concept of every single person that is in a renter's relationship has two things at place. They have a giver and they have a taker. Built within all of us, there is a giver and there is a taker. Okay? Pretty self-explanatory. In one context, you give, you sacrifice, you give, and eventually there is a switch that goes on or off, and then your taker steps in, and you take, and you take, and you take, and you take. You should all have the insert on your table if you want to take a peek at it. The giver says, do whatever you can to make others happy, and avoid anything that makes others unhappy, even if it makes you unhappy. Okay? The taker says, Do whatever you can to make yourself happy and avoid anything that makes you unhappy, even if it makes others unhappy. Okay? Here's a hint. Avoid the switch. Okay? How many here has ever said, I do not know what the heck happened? My wife or my husband, they're amazing. They go on and they're just so sacrificial, they're so loving, we're having sex, it's great, it's all of these things. And then all of a sudden, who here has ever heard the man, I don't know what happened then, we were great. And then everything just blew up and now she wants a divorce. This is a man's inability or unwillingness to see that his partner has a giver and a taker. And we all know of it in our own context, don't we? I don't understand. Why is it that all of a sudden Shondell is giving, and then immediately it's a switch and she's taking. Okay? The reason being is that there's always present within a renter's policy a giver and a taker. If that is your experience in your marriage, you are still within a renter's policy. You have yet to embrace the policy of enthusiastic agreement and enter into a marital covenant, if you will. You're not a buyer at this point. You're still a renter if this is your experience. When you are a renter, let me say this again. Every single person here has a giver and a taker built into the renter's policy. You can go from a buyer in one context and then step out of that covenant, if you will, and step into a renter's policy. Happens all the time. When you are a renter, you fight to even the scales. You know when you're making more deposits than your partner is. The taker will always prop its ugly head up, typically when your needs go unmet. Remember, the premise is that people fall in and out of love based off of needs met or unmet. As you go through your marriage and you have unfulfilled needs that continuously go unmet, you will then enter into a renter's policy and your taker will become the loudest. And you'll take, and you'll take, and you'll take. Even at the expense of your own spouse. In other words, when you're on the tofu diet, when you're only having sex once a month, you will be sacrificial. You'll be loving. You'll be caring. You'll be all those things that a wife needs you to be. But eventually, your physical sexual frustration catches up to you. And then, because men, for whatever reason, we have the Homer Simpson tendency, we don't like to talk, we don't understand why we have outbursts of anger. We just know we're frustrated. Well, dude, you haven't had sex in a month. Anybody would be frustrated, right? You're on the tofu diet. And being on the tofu diet, it keeps you alive, but it's gross. If you like tofu, then you're weird. The next insert on your table. The more you are positive, watch this. The more you are positive in your love bank, the stronger your giver becomes. You didn't hear me. The more that you are in positive territory with your love bank, with your spouse, the stronger your giver becomes. The more you are negative in your love bank, the stronger the taker becomes. You didn't hear me. If you are in a relationship and there is a switch that constantly happens in your marriage, giving, taking, giving, taking. This is indicative of your love bank balance being threatened and going downward. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. Many of you are struggling in your marriage, but you fail to recognize the importance of becoming a buyer instead of a renter. To negotiate the policy of enthusiastic agreement. Remember, I gave this story. It's a regular occurrence between my wife and I. Honey, I really want to have sex. Okay, well, right now I'm not in the mood. Okay, when will you be in the mood? I don't know, maybe when the kids go to bed. Okay, is there anything I can do to make sure I'm making deposits in your love bank to ensure that we have a good sexual experience? Yeah, you could try doing the dishes, domestic support, right? You can try being affectionate, not being a jerk. Okay, well, I'll not be a jerk, babe. If you tell a man that he's going to have sex at night, he's not sitting there wondering whether or not he's going to have sex. And guaranteed, you call him while he's at work, and you say, honey, no matter what, when you get home, we're having sex. Watch what happens to that man. His whole demeanor, his whole life changes. Okay, all right. He just outsold the highest salesman on his team. He just delivered the most deliveries that anybody before him ever did. He just stocked the groceries or whatever the heck he does. It changes the demeanor of your husband. In like manner, when you go to purposefully making deposits within your spouse's account and saying, babe, no matter what, we're going out to dinner. We're going to sit, we're going to talk, we're going to play cards. I'm going to make sure that we're going to be affectionate. We're going to make sure that we're making deposits within your love bank. We're going out to eat when we get home. She's going to have 15 dresses spread out over the bed because she's anticipating that, yes, finally, we get to go out to dinner. Thank God he values me. And she's going to get home with a frantic look on her face going, where are we going? Where are we going? Again, as you learn to speak their language and making deposits, your giver will be in charge. However, if you step into the renter's policy, it's in the renter's policy that you're giving. You're not having enthusiastic agreement. You're not conversating. And in so doing, you're at risk of falling into the habit of becoming a taker. And then you're like, screw this, I don't get anything from this. I'm going to take. It's all mine for the taking, baby. Your instinct as your love bank balance enters into the negative territory is your taker becomes stronger and stronger and stronger. You fail to realize that you fall in and out of love based off of needs met or unmet. Remember, we explained before that you have bank accounts with every person you know. You have a bank account with your friends. You have a bank account with your coworkers. You have a bank account with your boss. You have a bank account with your son or your daughter, your grandparents. The only difference between those relationships that are being made positive deposits in your bank account or negative withdrawals out of your bank account, the only difference between those relationships in your marriage is you can't get out of your marriage. So what ends up happening is you begin to have multiple withdrawals out of your love bank from your spouse. You enter into negative territory and overdraft fees kick in, baby. And that's when you go from liking someone to tolerating someone. I hate my wife. That's how it happens. Because your boss, you can quit your job. Your friend, you can say, go take a hike. Your grandparents says, well, your cookies aren't that good anyway. Forget you. You can remove other people out of your life. However, your spouse is the only individual you're stuck with. And being stuck with them, if you're not careful, those withdrawals you'll continuously make, and you will not only fall out of love with your partner, but you will begin to hate your partner. This is why divorce courts exist. This is why Judge Judy has a job. Or better yet, more properly identified, you become numb. You're numb. When you become calloused, the feet of a camel, somebody who spends their life on their hands and knees, their elbows become calloused. You don't feel it anymore. You're numb. And in being numb, it's almost just as scary because you've learned to be on the tofu diet. Oh, it doesn't bother me. They only have sex once a month. It's no big deal. It doesn't bother me that he never holds my hand. Not a big deal. That's just the way we are. We've just accepted it. It's our marriage. You're on the tofu diet. And tofu's gross. It's not recommended. I want a steak. The more your love bank balance suffers, the stronger your taker becomes. All those overdraft fees, negative balance fees, maintenance fees has a greater cost, because not only do you end up living in the negative with your partner, but you also have to fight the tendency to not allow your taker to take over. Listen to me very closely. Relationships that are based upon sacrifice are doomed for failure. Relationships based upon sacrifice, one partner sacrificing at the expense of their partner, is doomed for failure. Because one day you're going to wake up to that person and you're not going to have the feelings of love any longer. And we've already established the way that we curb the divorce rate is it's not from commitment, it's not from communication, it's not happy wife, happy life. In fact, it's maintaining a state of being in love. This is how you not only get into your 50s, but you're also in your 50s and you have not just a story to tell and going, well, I'm telling you, it's just commitment. Younger generation, they don't believe in marriage anymore. Meanwhile, their marriage is loveless. I'm like, sorry, I don't want that. That's not the example I want. I want to be making out with my wife in the grocery store. That's the standard. Being in love with my wife is the standard. Not just making it. Not just making it on the tofu diet. Don't be a renter. A renter will sacrifice at the expense of their partner because lots of times they lack the drive or the know-how to enthusiastically agree upon everything. Everything. You didn't hear me. Everything. Every decision. If you walk through in your binder the needs of each individual partner, between sexual fulfillment, between openness and honesty, between affection, between domestic support, family commitment, all of those intricacies, all of those nuances, you're making decisions as a husband and wife enthusiastically in agreement. Not just making an agreement. That's not what I'm talking about. Enthusiastically, both partners are 100% in agreement. And what's going to happen to your marriage when you make that policy the minimum of your marriage? The minimum requirement. It's going to force you to talk a lot more. Buckle up. It's the way God designed it. Typically, but not always, is it the person who is not the communicator within the relationship that tends to be the most sacrificial. You didn't hear me. Typically, but not always, is it the person who is not the communicator in the relationship is typically the one that is most sacrificial. The one less likely to communicate is usually the one who avoids tension and friction at all costs. Remember, I'm not advocating that you fight and that you argue. I'm advocating that you have conflict. And pending that conflict defined is one, you are in fact enthusiastically trying to get something from your partner, conflict number one, or conflict number two, you want them to stop doing something. Okay. The person that avoids tension and conflict are the ones that usually are the ones that are willing to sacrifice the most at the expense of their own individual needs. Additionally, the one who is usually, watch this, this is key, usually the quickest to forgive is the one who tends to sacrifice their individual needs for the sake of their partner. They are usually the renter. Let me say it again for those in the back. The one who is usually the quickest to forgive is the one who tends to sacrifice their individual needs for the sake of their partners. You ever wonder why in another fight they always bring up what happened in an old fight? Because you short-circuited the process of actually being able to forgive your partner. There is no shortcuts, ladies. There is no shortcuts, gentlemen. You are to enthusiastically agree upon everything, openness and honesty and intimate conversation. If those are present within a marriage, if you are forgiving too quickly, you are likely the person that is willing to sacrifice at the expense of a withdrawal from your own love bank to make a deposit within your spouse's. This is a mistake. I hope you're catching wind of what I'm saying. Moving on. It's amazing the amount of people that go from a freeloader to a renter as soon as they get married. You're a renter, and then you get married, and then you become a freeloader, baby. I got my man cave. I got my bear. I got my microwavable burrito because my wife hates me, and I got my foosball. That's all I need. Get down. Your marriage is failing, sir. When you enter into a relationship with a renter's policy, they commit, and then you immediately go into a freeloader, you're not going to stay married very long. People call this bait and switch. Right? Let me stop here and ask, what is the core of a freeloader? What's the core of, if you were to define a freeloader? What comes to your mind? Selfishness. And mistrust. Selfishness and mistrust. As we explained in past series, both partners have a love bank. That love bank of your individual needs that are continuously, hopefully getting met, has a bridge from one love bank to the next. That bridge is going to be just as narrow or just as wide to the degree that one, selflessness and trust are present. If your spouse cannot trust you, and your spouse knows that you're a selfish jerk, your bridge is going to be super narrow. You're not going to have a lot of needs going from one bank account to the next, are you? You're going to consistently be on the tofu diet. Commitment, intimate conversation, affection, domestic support, family commitment, sexual fulfillment, recreational activities. All of these things are barely going to cross over in the tiny bridge to the degree of trust and selflessness. A freeloader is the exact opposite of that. You can't trust them because they only are looking out for their needs and what's convenient or natural, and they're very selfish people. I love how marriage can't even make sense divorced from God, and yet the outside world can't make sense, and it's hilarious. How many men enter into marriage then and then go and only do things that require the least amount of effort? They spend hours tinkering with their vehicles, playing with their little model cars, playing video games. You're a grown man, sir, and you're playing Call of Duty until 2 in the morning. They spend hours sitting in their man cave. What makes matters worse, they have a freeloader mentality, and the wife will often negotiate by demanding, being disrespectful, and manipulating her way into forcing him to enter into a renter's policy. In her mind, her freeloader husband, if I can just get him to enter into a renter's policy to where at least it's even, then we'll be okay. Which could, in fact, prolong the marriage. Freeloaders don't stay married very long, as we already mentioned. Remember, the two principles of there being trust and selflessness. If you are selfish, the way God designed a marriage to work is having two selfless people come together. This, by the way, is why 80% of people who live together before they get married get divorced. They're on to their second, third, and fourth marriage. These major components, such as selfishness, fueled by the renter's agreement is never exchanged for the buyer's agreement. We don't want to be a freeloader. We don't want to be a renter. We want to be a buyer. Amen. It's very tempting to enter into a renter's policy from time to time. How do we stop this from happening? Any guesses? Through the policy of enthusiastic agreement. It's that simple. Every conversation, every decision, everything is agreed upon with enthusiastic agreement. Honey, I want to have sex. Babe, I'm not really in the mood. Any chance we can wait until the kids go to bed? I want to enjoy it also. Yes, that's fine. And the man through his day will not have to wonder whether or not he's going to starve when he gets home from work. Remember, being naked before your partner. Those that have watched the series number 2, strongly recommend that if you haven't already, make sure you watch that. It's one of the foundational pieces of tonight. Babe, yeah, I feel like you only care about golf and work, and you spend very little time with me. Any chance we could do something together? Can we do something that we both enjoy? Sure, of course. What did you have in mind? Maybe we can call in sick and take the day off together. I would like to have breakfast together, and then I'd like to go to a movie, and then I'd like to come home and have a good evening. Okay, what did the man hear in that scenario? He gets good food at breakfast. He gets good diarrhea, hot dogs, and popcorn at the movie theater, so good food there. And he gets to have sex when he gets home. What did the wife hear? He's going to spend time with me all throughout the day. He's going to hold my hand. He's going to show me off to the rest of the world. He's going to be showing affection. Intimate conversation is likely going to happen because on the car ride over there, we're going to be talking. We're going to be having fun. We're going to actually enjoy each other's company. Right? Both partners enthusiastically agreed, and both partners get their number 1 and number 2 needs met. The power of enthusiastic agreement, because a buyer can learn to negotiate for their needs. I'm advocating, ladies and gentlemen, that you become a master negotiator. A master negotiator. And be purposeful about meeting the needs of your partner selflessly. You want to know how you can always ensure that you are in fact engaging with good negotiation tactics instead of a sacrifice? You know how you can make sure you do that? Get really good about asking this question. Write this down. There's paper in the back of your binder. If you can memorize this question, I've seen it save marriages. Babe, how would you feel if? It's that simple. Babe, how would you feel if? Babe, how would you feel if? Get really good about asking that question. Because what that forces the couple to do is it forces the footing of that conversation to start off, at least on good footing, to where healthy, enthusiastic agreement is the end goal. Because watch, babe, how would you feel? You're communicating trust because you care about your partner. You're communicating selflessness because you're taking into account the needs of your partner. Babe, how would you feel if you're starting off on solid ground for healthy negotiation? We want conflict. Look at your spouse and say, I want to have conflict with you. I want to have conflict. If you do not have conflict in your marriage, it's indicative it's not a healthy marriage. This isn't one-sided. This isn't, well, I learned the secret to marriage a long time ago, and it's, yes, honey. Sir, you're an idiot. That's not how you stay married. Your wife doesn't want you sitting there like fat, sloppy Joe, going, whatever you want, honey. Get it through your Homer Simpson head. She wants to know what you think. Babe, how would you feel if? She wants you to engage with her and have intimate conversation with her. To be negotiating not just for her needs. She knows what she needs. She wants your needs to come onto the table as well. And you guys both negotiate about those needs. Here's the problem. We don't like admitting that we need our spouse. That's the core of it. That's the fundamental problem. We're supposed to be independent. I don't need my wife. I don't need my husband. The whole feminist movement. That's what it is. You don't need each other. Is that healthy? No. I'm not ashamed to say, babe, I really want to just have sex. Or, babe, I really want to just have recreational activity. Would you please play this video game with me? I know I'm approaching 40 and I'm a grown man, but I want to be a kid for a minute. Will you just play this game, X-Men, with me? Okay? Recreational activity. Your husband wants to spend time with you, ladies. In like manner, becoming a master negotiator of making sure that you are enthusiastically agreeing upon every decision is what's going to ensure that you do not step into the renter's policy, that you are always in a buyer's policy. Amen? We're going to take a 5-10 minute break. Come on back, grab some snacks. Insert on your table, list the major withdrawals that can exist within a marriage. Before I list those and give definitions to those, remember a good majority of them could be squashed completely if you are purposeful about implementing the policy of enthusiastic agreement. Let me say it again. Those 6 withdrawals that are usually present within a marriage that is suffering and is likely headed towards a downward spiral, most of them could be squashed and checked at the door if the policy of enthusiastic agreement is implemented. I hope you heard that. The number 1 withdrawal that exists within most marriages is demands. Commanding your spouse or demanding your spouse to do things that would benefit you at your spouse's expense. Both partners should never engage in demands. And I would say that if you really want to have a bad day, ladies, demand of your husband to do something in public. In church or around people that you know, if you are demanding to him in public, guaranteed to have a very bad day. Both partners are extremely sensitive to the issue of demands. No one wants to be told what to do. Think about your workplace for a minute. Who do you spend most of your time complaining about, gossiping about, talking crap about? Who is that person? Your boss. And what does your boss always do? Makes demands, doesn't he or she? That's exactly what they do. That's their MO. When demands are made to a spouse who is in a state of intimacy, watch this. Translation, you've made a fair amount of deposits within each other's love bank that you guys are doing okay. When demands are made in that context to a spouse who is in a state of intimacy, the giver will usually cave in without complaining. However, if you're in a state of conflict, remember, conflict is when you want something from your spouse or you want them to stop doing something, then you make your demand. Your spouse's taker will rise up and fight. Instead of finding a patsy to command, you instead find yourself battling your spouse's angry taker, who feels it's about time for you to stop bossing them around. A fight is likely emerging here. However, watch this, and this is how I know we as the human race, we have some work. Because watch, fights don't stop a couple from making demands. You make a demand, you guys get in a fight, and then it never dawns on you to not make a demand again. It's kind of interesting. You ever noticed? Your taker keeps telling you you have a right to make your demands of your spouse, even if it doesn't work. After all, your taker is your best defense attorney. And it is always prepared to explain why everything you do on your own behalf is reasonable. It will try to convince you that you have the right to make independent and selfish demands. Hopefully, we stop there and make an obvious observation for those that have been with us throughout the material. Remember that what we said, the higher the love bank balance is, the higher of chances that your giver will be in control. Translation, in a marriage where there is a healthy amount of sex, where the man isn't on the tofu diet, but he's sexually fulfilled, where the wife isn't on the tofu diet when it comes to affection and intimate conversation, where her husband actually expresses that he cares about her, gentlemen, then there wouldn't be the tendency to demand things. Why? Because more deposits are being made than withdrawals. And if you prevent yourself from demanding things from your partner, the love bank balance will grow, and the easier it becomes to act out of your giver. Number 2 major withdrawal, disrespectful judgments. This is one that I am absolutely guilty of. I'm just admitting it right now. Disrespectful judgments attempts to straighten your partner out, to straighten out their attitudes, their beliefs, by trying to lecture them or impose your way of thinking onto them through lecture, ridicule, threats, or other forceful means. Typically, remember how I mentioned the person who is not the communicator, the person that is the communicator in the marriage, usually they struggle with this one badly. Disrespectful judgments. They will lecture, they will ridicule, they will in fact impose their will upon you. Why? Because they are very good at communication. They're able to manipulate their way into such a way to be able to disrespectfully make demands of you and make judgments upon you or your moral character. Number 3, angry outburst. Listen to me, every eye up here. Angry outbursts are a way that we attempt to punish our spouse. I hope you're catching wind of what I'm saying. When you have an angry outburst with your spouse, automatically via translation, you're not fooling anybody. This is your way of trying to control and punish your spouse. We're going to touch on angry outbursts a lot as we move forward, but one thing I want to make mention of: no one makes you angry. Did you hear what I just said? No one makes you angry. You choose to be angry. I don't know what it is about our wet noodle culture, but nobody takes responsibility anymore. Everything is saying this, it's the serpent that you gave me, God. Oh, it's the woman that you gave me, God. It's always putting the blame on someone else. If you have a habit of angry outbursts, it is your fault, sir or ma'am. Nobody else controls your emotional behavior. I grew up in a very abusive home, and I can tell you firsthand, all 7 dads that I have, and a schizophrenic bipolar mother, she would always use angry outbursts to control the outcome in the situation. It is manipulation, it is control and it is an attempt to punish your partner. And it has the potential to make some of the largest withdrawals out of your lover's bank account. Are you with me? Let me say it again for those that didn't hear it. No one makes you angry. It's an attempt to punish your spouse. It is an attempt to punish your spouse. It is an attempt to punish your spouse. I hope you're hearing it, because I know it's hard to catch wind of it. It's an attempt to punish your spouse. Angry outburst is the failure of the individual to step out of the renter's policy and enter the buyer's policy. Number 4, major withdrawal, dishonesty. Remember, the bridge that carries the emotional needs from one love bank to the next is what? Selflessness and trust. If you do not have trust and selflessness present within your marriage, it will be to the degree of those emotional needs are able to freely move back and forth between one love bank to the next. A major withdrawal within a marriage is dishonesty. There are 4 kinds of liars. One in which is the person who lies to protect. They lie to protect themselves or to protect others. Number 2, lie. They want to look good. People lie to look good. I'm prone to that. Number 3, avoiding trouble. How many times does the non-communicator in the marriage appear to be dishonest? Because they're not being honest first with themselves and then secondly with their partner. And then there's also the compulsive liar, which God help you if that's you. So don't be that. All right? You lie to protect, you lie to look good, you lie to stay out of trouble, or you're a compulsive liar, which the Lord help you. Okay? Don't be that person. Number 5, major withdrawal. Annoying habits. Behaviors repeated without much thought that bother the other spouse. With this love buster, most partners tend to downplay the importance of this love buster. Annoying habits. They tend to downplay it. It's not that big of a deal. Not that big of a deal. I left my socks on the floor. Not that big of a deal. Yeah, I picked my nose, honey. Okay, I'm sorry. It's an annoying habit. Well, enthusiastically agree that you don't pick it and then eat it, okay? If you do, that's messed up. Come to an enthusiastic agreement either way.
Might be a little better in tofu.
Might be a little better in tofu, you're not wrong. I'm not going to get to this one very much, but I will say this, and I found it really, really helpful in my marriage. And it tends to fall into the same category with annoying habits. Husbands, especially if you have a beautiful wife like mine, we like to grope. We do. We tend to substitute groping with affection in our minds. This is not what it communicates to your wife, gentlemen. Groping for most women is something that they tolerate. If you're in a loveless marriage and your marriage is on the rocks, okay, and you're in a freeload or a renter's policy and you're struggling, most women will settle for groping because at least he's touching me and not his porno, right? That's how most women think. But in a healthy relationship where there is enthusiastic agreement between the husband and the wife, most women do not like groping. And I am guilty. I am a groper. I like to grope. Okay? It's my way of just saying I love you. It's just what I do. Most women do not like this, gentlemen. I want you to hear me. This is not something they like or enjoy. This is what is considered an annoying habit for them. Now, your wife will probably go, well, I know you really like to grope, but can you just not do it as much? That's how you know she really doesn't like it. It's not something she likes or appreciates. She doesn't want to be honest with you because she does like the attention a little bit, but she doesn't want to be in pain, gentlemen. Okay? She doesn't want to feel like just a sexual object. Moving on. There's more I can talk about in terms of leaving clothes on the floor, picking nose, not shutting cupboard doors, lots more. This is one we're going to neglect, the annoying habits. We're not going to touch on it outside of tonight. This is it. So I hope you catch wind of it, you understand it, you put it in your memory bank, and you recognize that, you know what, if there's annoying habits, this can make major withdrawals in your marriage. The last one, which I think is prominent throughout our culture, independent behavior. Activities of a spouse are conceived, watch this, and executed as if the other spouse did not exist. Remember, the taker wants you to be happy at all costs. Ignoring the interest of others is its MO. Your taker is your best defense attorney, always ready to explain why what they are doing is reasonable. What's yours is yours, and what's mine is mine. Independent behavior is very prominent within our culture. It's the activities of a spouse that are conceived and executed as if the spouse did not exist. Did you hear me? Independent behavior are decisions that are made and executed as though your spouse doesn't exist. Or their feelings. Independent behavior is an attempt to justify their behavior with, say, things like, my spouse is just clinging. They're just clinging. They're suffocating me. They're controlling. Ew. That's typical of somebody who wants and is more prone towards independent behavior. I just don't want to be suffocated, okay? That's usually the response. Independent behavior has the potential to make the largest withdrawals in the core of your most sacred emotional needs. Let me say that again. I know it's getting late, and I know I've informationally thrown up on you, but hang on. Independent behavior has the potential to make the largest withdrawals in the core of your largest needs. I'll say it one more time. Independent behavior has the potential to make the largest withdrawals in the core of the largest areas of your need. Meaning, in the area of sexual fulfillment, let me give you an example. You can be extremely selfish in the bedroom. How many married couples that I have spoken with that the man is usually the selfish party? Gentlemen, take care of your wives in the bedroom. Don't be a selfish jerk when it comes to sexual needs. In the area of recreational activities, your interest, your hobbies, your friends, your lifestyle can be completely separate and independent of your spouse. I can tell you, my job allows me to get into lots of homes. And I cannot tell you how many people are married, but they never become one. Becoming one takes work, freeloader. Becoming one takes work, renter. Becoming one is a process of continuous negotiation for your most important emotional needs and implementing the enthusiastic agreement upon everything. But I cannot tell you how many couples that I come in contact with, they're not married. They have a certificate from the state, but they're not married. They're separate people, separate finances, separate opinions. I mean, heck, we got couples that one's a Republican and one's a Democrat. God only knows they're not talking. Oh, we don't touch upon the issue of religion. I'm Catholic, she's Protestant. We don't go there. Oh, you mean you don't have the emotional maturity to talk through your issues and come under the umbrella of one household and becoming married? There is nothing off limits. There is never a topic in which you don't happily, enthusiastically agree upon everything. I've met people, listen up, where you have somebody who has a doctorate degree in theology. This is real life experience, by the way. And their wife doesn't even know the basics of systematic theology. They're not talking. They're not coming together. You ask my wife, and I'm not trying to say this arrogantly or boastfully, she at least knows at least what I'm talking about. She's able to keep up. Why? Because my recreational activity of theology and God and growing and all of the things that faith includes, we share in that. That's a recreational activity that we both talk about, enthusiastically agree upon. We talk for hours, the 15 hours minimum required to keep a husband and wife married. But they're not married anymore. You got his bank account over here, my bank account over here. We got different disciplinary things that he does it this way, I do it this way. When it comes to domestic support, that's his room, this is my room. They're not even sleeping they're sleeping in separate beds. Come on! We're not married. You're not becoming one. You go golfing for hours with your buddies. You go shopping for hours with your girlfriends. You have separate, independent lives from your spouse. 15 hours minimum required in order for emotional needs to be met between the husband and the wife. You go on long hunting trips with your buddies. Once again, carving into yours and your spouse's minimum of 15 hours required. For those that are not with me up to this point, we advocated for 15 hours minimum was the necessary time in which a husband and wife are able to emotionally meet the needs of their partner. Anything short of that, you're at risk of falling out of love with your partner. You have shopping dates, consistent girl night out. Once again, leaving no room in most cases for 15 hours minimum. See, I'm not against people having their own activity. You want to go hiking with your buddies? Leave your wife at home because she doesn't want to hike? Fair enough. But not at the expense of the 15 hours minimum. How many men will go on long hunting trips, hiking trips, basketball? There's men at the YMCA that have 4 or 5 kids, and they get off from work, they go to the gym, and that's their life. You're not there, gentlemen. You're not with your husband. You're not with your wife. You're independent. You're not married. However, with the policy of negotiation and enthusiastic agreement, you can enthusiastically agree upon your recreational activities. Honey, I want to go golfing. You want to go? No. You want to go do tennis instead? Yeah, I'll play tennis. Enthusiastic agreement, minimum of 15 hours. You see, what I'm advocating is that instead of you and your spouse being independent, I want you to be interdependent. I want you to be codependent. Definitionally, it means making decisions with the other partner's interests, feelings, and perspectives in mind. Again, the magic word or words. Babe, how would you feel if? How would you feel if? How would you feel if? What's interesting about codependence is that you will not have fewer conflicts. You will actually have a lot more. You will. Thank God for it. Better yet, in reality, with the policy of enthusiastic agreement and openness and honesty at the center, you will be just predisposed to more of them because you'll be addressing things as they come up. How many times do we bury stuff? We sacrifice, we suppress. You're not doing anybody any favors. Learning to, if you're not a confrontational person, you need to learn to be confrontational with your spouse. Advocating and negotiating for your emotional needs. There are two kinds of conflict, as we discussed. Wanting something from your partner, wanting them to stop doing something. Conflict is healthy and is expected from a couple who engage in enthusiastic agreement. If you are not experiencing conflict on a daily basis, you are at risk of not meeting each other's emotional needs. Demands, judgments, and angry outbursts are never okay and are more prone with the individual who's unwilling to negotiate for their emotional needs. Openness and honesty, we're getting close to closing, will force the individual to bring up their core needs. Remember how we advocated in last week or prior weeks past to become absolutely naked. Gentlemen, you are to be naked, emotionally naked, spiritually naked, completely naked. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? Emotionally and spiritually naked with your wife, with your spouse, with your wife. Women, all we want you to do is be physically naked. Okay? Men, open your mouth and talk to your wife. Be naked about your insecurities, your failures, your shortcomings. Men, I don't care what the insecurity is. Be open and honest and bare before her. Women, just undress. Okay? If you have to, both of you sit on your bed butt naked and sit there and stare at each other. It works. Be naked. But I find it more effective that you deal with the issues upon their onset opposed to burying them and sweeping them under the rug. Remember, we had said that the love bank balance is in the negative territory. It's then that your taker is typically in control. The taker will tend to default to independent behavior. This is why it's so important that you make sure you're making deposits, because when your love bank balance is in the positive, your giver is usually in control. All right. Enthusiastic agreement upon everything. If you can implement that one thing into your marriage, you will eliminate almost 90% of the withdrawals that you're more prone to do. Think about it. If you have a tendency to make demands on your partner, if you have a tendency to make disrespectful judgments in the form of lecturing and ridicule, if you have a tendency of outburst of anger, think about the policy of enthusiastic agreement and what that does. It forces you to negotiate for your emotional needs and bring them to the surface. Are you with me? It will squash about 90% of the withdrawals. Even annoying habits. Coming to an enthusiastic agreement about annoying habits. It's amazing what this policy will do for you in your marriage if you actually implement it, if you actually do it. All right. The Lord to bless you and to keep you. I want the Lord to make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you, and no good thing will he withhold from them that walk uprightly. God bless you guys. Have a good day.